Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Despicable Me. Some of the nastiest comments I received, or stupidest, or, best of all, a combination of both. And this is one of those, stupid and nasty. And, well, the anti-Semites are back. They never go away, but every so often they vanish for a while. They go back under the rocks out of which they crawl, from under which they crawl. And, you get a breather. But then something pops up and some unbelievably stupid comment shows itself. And here is one of them from the informaticist, whoever or whatever that is. This was a video I made. I don't even remember what the video was, to be honest with you. But I made some sort of comparison at some point between Beethoven and Mendelssohn, I gather. And he writes to me as follows. I think you are confusing literacy and facility with genius. Beethoven was illiterate about many things, but he was definitely a genius that Mendelssohn could only dream of being. He was well educated and he was facile, but a genius? Nah, you just like him because you are Jewish. Well, now, where do we start? First, let's take this one phrase at a time, because there's so much that's just completely witless and stupid about it that it's going to be fun to kind of take it apart. All right. I think you are confusing literacy and facility with genius. Well, that is assuming this person knows what any of those things are, especially genius. Isn't it amazing how stupid people seem perfectly capable of identifying genius? I've never quite understood that. You know, it's kind of like when religious people say that God is unknowable and incomprehensible, and then proceeds to tell us exactly what God wants and what he said and what he did and what we're doing wrong because God wants it that way. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. So Beethoven was a genius. This person has it absolutely down pat what genius is. Okay. So Beethoven was illiterate about many things, but he was definitely a genius. Well, okay. First of all, you can't be illiterate about many things. You can either be literate or illiterate. In other words, either you can read or you can't read. That's what illiterate means. You can be ignorant about some things, but that requires a precision of thought and language which the informaticist is incapable of projecting, I think, in his written correspondence. But Beethoven, he assures us, was definitely a genius. Of course, we wouldn't have known otherwise, would we? And what is fascinating to me is that why does one preclude the other? I mean, does the fact that Mozart was a genius mean that Haydn couldn't be a genius? Or because Beethoven was a genius, Mendelssohn couldn't be a genius? You know, it's not a quality that's in short supply, to be honest with you, unless you want to define it in such a way as to exclude everybody you don't like. As, for example, this person does. Okay, fine. So a genius that Mendelssohn could only dream of being. Well, I suppose if he knows what a genius is, he also knows what Mendelssohn was dreaming about. I'm sure Mendelssohn went to bed every night and said that he was a genius. I mean, he dreamt about being a genius and woke up terribly, terribly disappointed to realize that he was not a genius. Okay, fine. He was well educated. Yes, he was extremely well educated and was facile. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, he did write like 750 works. I guess that expresses a certain facility. But that's sort of a joke. That's the Mendelssohn of 100 years ago that people used to kind of make fun of. The Anti-Semites, in fact, made fun of him for that reason. You know, they thought that you could not be prolific and be a genius. Okay, so I guess that rules out like Mozart or Bach, right? They were facile. I mean, Bach churned out a cantata every week, jumping it up and it up and it up, you know? I mean, it was like clockwork. And so he must not have been a genius. Of course not. He was just facile. And then we have, you must like him because you are Jewish. Well, So not only, let's get this straight, not only does the informaticist know that Beethoven was a genius, that Mendelssohn was not, and what he dreamed about, but he also knows why I like Mendelssohn. Well, the honest truth, it's very interesting actually, because I think this is a very interesting statement, that I only like him because I was Jewish. For most of my life, I have not liked Mendelssohn. I didn't. I really didn't. I subscribed to the old prejudice against Mendelssohn, that he was facile, that he was, just sort of this wimpy, dandyish Victorian prude who wrote kind of washed out, uninteresting music. I mean, that really was how I felt about a lot of his stuff. And stupid me. How did I get to understand Mendelssohn? Well, that wasn't because he was Jewish. It's because I was asked to write a book about him. And I did. And in writing a book, I had to listen. Oh, what a difference listening makes. I'll bet the informaticist would be dazzled. No, he's too stupid for that. But, listening makes a difference. And so I studied and read and listened and listened and listened. And in the course of that experience, I got to know Mendelssohn really well and found him fascinating and his music stunning. And a lot of you who never had that initial prejudice I had against his music knew it all along, that he was a genius and that his music was fabulous. And and there's a lot of it that people don't know. I mean, just a lot of it. Oh my goodness. One of the great discoveries was his fugue in E minor from his 6 fugues for piano, whatever that piece is. I don't get names right, that. Oh gosh, what an incredible piece that is. And the trumpet overture, which I played timpani in and was sort of like ignoring, but then I actually listened to it. It's got such beautiful writing and wonderful tunes, and it's thematically ingenious. And Die erste Walpurgisnacht, the best half hour of choral music in the entire first half of the Romantic period. It's kind of like the Bach Magnificat of early Romantic music. It does everything a choral music's supposed to do, but gets it over with in half an hour. And the story's great, and the music's atmospheric, and it's just amazing. There's so much good stuff. Even Elijah and St. Paul. Well, St. Paul I never quite caught into, but Elijah, wow, baby. So, and the organ music. I could go on and on and on and on. Mendelssohn is a gift that keeps on giving as a composer. Wonderful discoveries that await all of us who listen. But the issue here is that I like him because I'm Jewish. Well, how can I possibly begin to quantify how stupid that remark is? I'm proud of being Jewish. Definitely. I think it's marvelous. I think that there's a lot in Jewish culture that's incredibly admirable, including the emphasis on education, which I think is really critically significant. It was to me, but the irony here is that if I cared about, because I'm Jewish, that he should be Jewish, I would detest him because he was a card-carrying, devout Lutheran for his entire life. His parents converted him when he was 7 years old. They didn't raise him with any religion at all before that. They were assimilationists to the nth degree. And I've never been particularly respectful of the idea of being an assimilationist. I think you should stand out. But of course, I didn't live in Germany in the early 19th century, when life was vastly more difficult for Jewish people. And I can't criticize his decisions. But if I were religious and the fact that I was Jewish determined my taste, then I would certainly have a problem with somebody who renounced his Judaism. Renounced it. I mean, renounced. Mendelssohn himself actually was really walking a tightrope in terms of his legacy. Because remember, in the early 19th century, Judaism was not just a religion or a culture. It was a race. And that's a horrible thing. I mean, I've never subscribed to that theory. Most Jews are Caucasians. I mean, they belong to whatever race they belong to. If they're African-American Jews, then they're African-Americans. If they're Asian Jews, they're Asians. I don't even think about race when it comes to my heritage, my religious heritage. But the idea of racial Judaism was a horrifying construct imposed by Christendom on the Jewish people in order to keep them segregated and ghettoized, and it was wholly unpleasant. And so I rejected that from the first time I could breathe or think, practically. It was not anything like that. So the only issue of Judaism for me is a religious one, and I'm not a religious person at all. I am culturally very Jewish, people would say. People have told me. And I think that's great. That's just who you are. And as far as Mendelssohn's religion goes, well, that was his business. I mean, who cares? Seriously. I mean, if I were Jewish in that way, in the way Mr. Informicist thinks, yes, I would dislike Mendelssohn. I wouldn't be favoring him because I'm Jewish. I would be opposing him because he renounced the religion of his forefathers and disgraced his family name. And I mean, come on. It's all just crazy. But that does go to the mindset of Mr. Informaticist, who seems to think that I really care about such things. And I don't. I don't at all. I mean, people have criticized me for all kinds of things that were politically incorrect, for praise just recently for recommending a recording by Robert King, who was a convicted sex offender. For that, I should not recommend his recordings. My personal feeling about that is that if he was convicted of a crime and he served his time, it's over. He was punished. Society extracted its punishment from him, and now he's got to get on with his life, and it has nothing to do with how good his music is or his recordings. I mean, everybody has to walk their own path when it comes to that sort of thing. But I would never, ever presume they would say, to say to somebody, oh, you just like Robert King because you're gay. Or, Robert King actually happened to be married, I believe, with children. So, to get into the personal lives of these people and to get into their thoughts and then to develop preferences which have absolutely nothing to do with the experience of listening to their music, to their work, to their productions, I think it's a dangerous path, because it distracts us from what matters, which is, of course, the music itself. And as a professional critic, which is what I sort of am, I can't let anything get in the way of the way that I hear the music and discuss the music qua music, based on musical characterizations and things like that. Even Furtwängler and Karajan, and you can make fun of them, which is, I think, terrific. You can make fun of anybody. Make fun of Karajan, his fabulous disc Nazis on Parade, or Furtwängler, and his behavior during the Nazi period. These are things that can always be the subject of ridicule, but they'll never get in the way of my evaluation of the musical quality of whatever I'm called upon to listen to. And that's just as true of Mendelssohn. And that's why Mr. Informaticist, whatever the hell that is a card-carrying anti-Semite, and should be exposed as such. And there you have it, my friends. They just keep on coming. So keep on listening and take care.